Shadows of Azulon. The atmospheric shield of Azulon rippled like liquid sapphire as Kellen Mercer's small diplomatic vessel pierced through it. Warnings had flooded his communication channels since he'd announced his mission 3 standard months ago. The Netherians of Azulon did not welcome outsiders. Ever. Final approach sequence initiated. The ship's AI announced in its characteristically flat tone. Atmospheric composition with intolerance. Landing site coordinates locked. Kellen ran his hand through his dark, wind-tousled hair and exhaled slowly. 6 years of interstellar diplomatic service had brought him to increasingly challenging assignments. But this was different. The galactic confluence needed resources that only Azulon possessed, and every previous envoy had either returned unsuccessful or hadn't returned at all. As the ship descended through cloud layers tinged with violet and indigo, jagged mountain ranges emerged below, dotted with structures that seemed to grow organically from the terrain itself. The landing zone, a flat expanse of midnight blue stone, appeared to have been carved from the mountain by deliberate, precise force. His vessel touched down with a gentle thud. Kellen gathered his diplomatic credentials, straightened his simple, gray envoy uniform, and tried to ignore the quickening of his pulse. The mission brief had been sparse. The Netherians were humanoid, possessed advanced technology despite their seemingly primitive lifestyle, and were exclusively female, reproducing through methods unknown to the confluence. The airlock hissed open, and Azulon's air rushed in, sweet, heavy with unfamiliar spices, and charged with something that made the hairs on his arms stand up. Energy, power, something beyond scientific explanation. He stepped onto Azulonian soil, boots crunching on the crystalline surface. For a long moment there was only silence and the distant cry of avian creatures circling the mountain peaks. Then they appeared. 7 figures emerged from what he had mistaken for natural rock formations. Tall and lithe, their skin ranged from deep azure to pale cerulean, covered strategically with armor that appeared to be crafted from both metal and living material. Their hair, flowing in shades from deepest black to midnight blue with silver streaks throughout, moved almost independently, as if affected by unseen currents. But it was their eyes that froze Kellen in place, entirely silver, with no visible pupils, yet clearly observing him with intense scrutiny. The tallest among them stepped forward. Her skin was the deepest blue, almost like the night sky of Earth, scattered with what appeared to be naturally occurring luminescent patterns resembling constellations. The armor she wore was more elaborate than the others, with curved plates that followed the strong lines of her body, highlighting rather than hiding her powerful physique. "I am Vera, war chief of the 8th Mountain Tribe of Netheria," she spoke, her voice carrying a musical quality that seemed impossible from a human throat. "You trespass on sacred land, outsider." Kellen bowed deeply, exactly 30 degrees, the gesture of respect without submission that his research suggested might be acceptable. "War Chief Vera, I am Kellen Mercer, diplomatic envoy of the Galactic Confluence. I come with peaceful intent, seeking dialogue between our peoples." A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the assembled warriors. Vera's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in those silver eyes. "Many have come with words of peace," she said, while harboring thoughts of conquest. "I harbor only curiosity and respect," Kellen replied, maintaining steady eye contact despite the unsettling nature of her gaze. "And authorization to discuss trade that would benefit both our worlds." Vera approached, moving with fluid grace that belied her warrior's build. She circled him slowly, and Kellen fought every instinct to turn and keep her in his sight. Vulnerability was part of trust building with the Netherians, another fragment from his limited briefing. "Your heart beats steadily for one so far from home," she observed, completing her circle to face him again. "Either you are exceptionally brave or remarkably foolish. Perhaps a measure of both," Kellen admitted with the hint of a smile. "The best diplomats usually are." Something unexpected happened then, a slight shift in Vera's expression, the briefest curl at the corner of her mouth. "You will be confined to the outer sanctum until the council determines your fate." she declared. If you attempt to communicate with your people or venture beyond the boundaries set, your life is forfeit. These terms are non-negotiable. Kellen nodded once. I accept your terms with gratitude for the opportunity to remain, as the warriors escorted him toward a structure shimmering with the same energy as the atmospheric shield. Kellen caught Vera watching him with an intensity that went beyond mere suspicion. On Azulon, he realized, survival would require more than diplomatic training. It would demand something deeper, something that could reach across the vast differences between their worlds and find common ground in the most unexpected of places. The language of stars dawn on Azulon broke in ripples of emerald and sapphire light, casting prismatic patterns across the walls of Kellen's quarters in the outer sanctum. 7 days had passed since his arrival, each filled with carefully monitored interactions with designated cultural liaisons, all keeping a measured distance both physically and emotionally. The chamber they had assigned him was Spartan yet beautiful, carved from living crystal that hummed with faint energy. A curved archway led to a balcony overlooking the valley where most of the Netherian community dwelled. Their structures, half-grown, half-built, spiraled organically from the terrain, connected by bridges that appeared to be woven from light itself. The council will receive you today, announced a voice from the doorway. Kellen turned to find Tavanis, a younger Netherian with pale blue skin and silver-streaked indigo hair, pulled into intricate braids. As his assigned guide, she was the closest thing he had to an ally here. Has War Chief Vera returned from the border expedition? He asked, trying to sound casual. Tavanis's silver eyes narrowed slightly. The War Chief's movements are not your concern, outsider. Despite her formal tone, Kellen had begun to recognize subtle variations in Netherian expressions. The slight tension around Tavanis's mouth suggested concern rather than hostility. My apologies, he said, bowing his head slightly. I only ask because the council typically includes all tribal leaders. You have studied our ways, Tavanis observed, her posture relaxing fractionally. The war chief will join when she returns. Come, the solar alignment will soon be optimal for the council gathering. Kellen followed her through corridors that seemed to shift subtly as they walked, the crystal walls responding to Tavanis's presence in ways they never did to his. Outside, the primary star of Azulon's system cast long shadows across the settlement, illuminating the azure-skinned inhabitants going about their daily tasks. He had noticed that despite their warrior reputation, the Netherians devoted significant time to creative pursuits, intricate metalwork, cultivation of bioluminescent plants, and most intriguing to Kellen, the preservation of ancient texts in a library carved into the mountain core. The council chamber was a perfect hemisphere, its ceiling open to the sky. 9 Netherians awaited, seated in a crescent formation, their ceremonial armor glinting with embedded crystals that caught and refracted the light. An empty seat, more elaborately decorated than the others, stood at the center. As Kellen approached the speaking circle, a commotion at the chamber entrance drew all eyes. Vera strode in, her armor bearing fresh battle marks, her constellation patterned, skin seeming to pulse with barely contained energy. The syndicate vessels have withdrawn, she announced without preamble, taking her seat. For now. The tension in the room was palpable as the assembled council members exchanged glances laden with unspoken communication. Then we proceed, declared Elder Jysene, the oldest Netherian Kellen had encountered, her once midnight hair now almost entirely silver. Envoy Kellen Mercer, state your purpose before the full council. Kellen stepped forward, feeling the weight of silver eyes upon him. Honorable Council, I come seeking mutual understanding between our peoples. The Galactic Confluence recognizes Azulon's sovereignty and wishes to establish diplomatic relations that respect your independence while opening dialogue about limited resource exchange. You speak of respect, while your confluence ships probe our outer defenses. Vera interjected, her voice cool. Curious timing for diplomatic overtures. Kellen's brow furrowed. If confluence vessels have violated your space, I was not informed. My mission is purely diplomatic. Yet you arrive as the Syndicate increases its incursions, Elder Jysene observed. 2 outsider factions suddenly interested in our isolated world. The Syndicate? Kellen asked, genuine confusion evident in his voice. They have no official presence in this sector. A ripple of murmurs passed through the council. Vera leaned forward, her silver eyes seeming to pierce through to his very thoughts. You truly don't know, she said, more statement than question. Knowledge is currency, War Chief, Kellen replied carefully. I offer what I have in good faith. If there is syndicate activity threatening Azulon, the confluence should be informed. They represent a common threat. Take him to the archives, Vera commanded unexpectedly, rising from her seat. I will accompany him myself. Elder Jysene raised a hand in protest. War Chief, the archives are sacred, and our survival may depend on what they contain, Vera countered. The outsider has knowledge of our enemies. We have knowledge he seeks. A temporary exchange serves our purpose. The descent into the mountain's heart took them through passages increasingly lined with the bioluminescent flora native to Azulon, casting an ethereal blue glow that made Vera's skin shimmer like the night sky. Neither spoke as they traveled deeper, the air growing heavy with age and secrets. The archives opened before them, a vast chamber where crystal columns housed swirling energy patterns that Kellen gradually recognized as information storage, far more advanced than anything the confluence possessed. These records date back 20,000 years, Vera said, her voice softer here among the wisdom of her ancestors. They speak of a time when the Syndicate first discovered our world, and the price we paid for resisting them. Kellen moved closer to one of the columns, mesmerized by the dancing lights within. You understand the patterns, Vera observed with surprise. Not exactly, Kellen admitted, but they resemble quantum encoding methods theoretical scientists have proposed. Information stored in light itself. Something shifted in Vera's demeanor, the faintest relaxation of her guard. Few outsiders have shown such perception. A particular column drew Kellen's attention, its patterns pulsing with urgency. This one is active. Recent information? Our border sensors, Vera confirmed. The Syndicate ships carry mining equipment designed for crystalline extraction, the same technology used when they first came, before we developed defenses against them. Understanding dawned on Kellen as pieces aligned in his mind. The Azulanite crystal formations. They're not just beautiful, they're the source of your energy manipulation abilities. Vera's silver eyes widened fractionally. For the first time, Kellen felt he had genuinely surprised her. Perhaps, she said after a pause that stretched between them like a tenuous bridge. There is value in this exchange after all, Envoy Kellen, Mercer. As they stood amid the swirling knowledge of ages, Kellen realized that the true language of Azulon wasn't found in words, but in the patterns of light that connected all things, including perhaps two people from worlds that couldn't be more different. Tides of transformation. The northern ridge of Mount Silavis erupted in chaos as the Syndicate scout ship crashed through Azulon's defense barrier. Kellen sprinted alongside Vyra and her warriors, the ground trembling beneath their feet as the vessel carved a burning path through the sacred crystal forests. They've adapted to our shield frequency, Vyra shouted, her constellation-marked skin pulsing with combat energy. Defensive positions. 3 weeks on Azulon had transformed Kellen from reluctant guest to trusted ally. A transition accelerated by his discovery in the archives of ancient Confluence Netherian communications, proving a forgotten alliance millennia ago. The crashed ship's hull split open with a metallic shriek. Humanoid figures in environment suits poured out, wielding energy cutters designed specifically for harvesting Azulanite crystals. Thereafter the heart chamber, Tavanis cried, notching an arrow that glowed with the same energy that powered Netherian weapons. Vera turned to Kellen, silver eyes flashing. Your confluence technology, can you disrupt their suits? Kellen pulled out the modified communicator he'd been working on with the Netherian tech specialists. Theoretically, I need to get closer. I'll cover you, Vera decided instantly, signaling 2 warriors to join them. They advanced through the burning underbrush, Vera's blade deflecting energy bolts with impossible precision. Kellen had witnessed her battle prowess before, but each time left him in awe. the fluid grace that belied lethal force, the complete oneness with her weapons and environment. At the crash site perimeter, Kellen activated his device. The Syndicate, raiders faltered as their suit systems flickered and failed, leaving them vulnerable to the Netherians' counterattack. Victory seemed certain until a secondary explosion rocked the ship's core. The blast threw Kellen backward and sent a massive crystal formation toppling toward a group of young Netherian apprentices who had followed the warriors despite orders to remain behind. Without hesitation, Kellen threw himself forward, using his body to shield the youngest apprentice as Vera simultaneously leaped to divert the falling crystal with her energy-infused blade. The crystal shattered, its fragments raining down like stars. When the dust settled, Kellen lay bleeding but conscious. The young Netherian, Javisa, Elder Gyceen's granddaughter, unharmed beneath him. Later, in the healing chambers, Vera sat beside Kellen's recovery pod, her usually stoic features softened by something he couldn't quite name. "You risked your life for one of our children," she said quietly. "The Council has taken notice." Kellen winced as the healing energies knitted his fractured ribs. "I didn't think. I just acted." "That is precisely why it matters," Vera replied, tentatively placing her hand over his. The contact sent a current of warmth through him that had nothing to do with Netherian healing technology. "The Syndicate will return in greater numbers," Kellen said, trying to focus on the tactical situation rather than the unprecedented physical contact. "My confluence credentials can request reinforcements, but it would mean exposing your people to our world," Vera finished for him. "To our power source." The unspoken question hung between them. Could Azulon trust the confluence when the temptation of Azulanite power might prove too great? "My people aren't perfect," Kellen admitted, "but neither are they the Syndicate. There must be a middle path, one where Azulon doesn't stand alone but doesn't surrender its sovereignty either." Something changed in Vera's silver eyes, a decision forming. "There is another way," she said softly. "An ancient ceremony of binding. It would create a covenant between a Netherian and an outsider, a living bridge between worlds. The implication hung in the air between them, electric with possibility." "This ceremony," Kellen asked, his voice barely above a whisper, "has it been performed before?" "Once," Vera replied, "when the stars were young and our isolation had not yet hardened into law. It would require sacrifice from both participants." As their eyes met in the glow of the healing chamber, Kellen realized that the transformation happening on Azulon wasn't just about diplomatic relations or defending against the Syndicate. It was about two people from different worlds recognizing something unexpected in each other, something worth risking everything to protect. Celestial convergence. The binding ceremony preparations consumed the central cavern of Mount Celavis. Crystalline formations were arranged in concentric circles, each pulsing with energy that responded to the movements of the 12 elder Netherians, who worked in perfect harmony, weaving light and sound into physical patterns. Kellen stood at the threshold, his confluence uniform replaced by ceremonial Netherian attire, a fitted tunic of material that seemed to shift between solid and liquid, embedded with Azulanite fragments that resonated with his unique biorhythm. "You understand what this means," Elder Gyceen said, her ancient silver eyes studying him intently. "Once bound to Vera, you become part of Azulon, neither fully Netherian nor fully human." "I understand," Kellen replied, watching as Vera entered from the opposite side of the cavern. She wore ceremonial armor unlike any he had seen, living metal that flowed over her azure skin like water, the constellation patterns beneath glowing with unprecedented brightness. Her midnight blue hair had been braided with silver threads that captured and amplified the light around her. Their eyes met across the chamber, and the weeks of gradual trust building, of shared dangers and quiet conversations beneath alien stars, crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. "The Syndicate fleet has entered the outer system," announced Tavanis, rushing into the chamber, "and confluence vessels have responded to your emergency beacon. Both will reach Azulon within hours." A ripple of concern passed through the gathered Netherians. The timing couldn't be worse. Two potentially hostile forces converging on their world while its protective barriers were temporarily weakened for the binding. "We proceed," Vera declared, silencing the murmurs. "The binding will strengthen our defenses, not weaken them." Not everyone agreed. Lavinia, Vera's second-in-command, stepped forward. "War Chief, this outsider has brought both threats to our doorstep. How can we trust that this isn't precisely what he intended?" "Because I know his heart," Vera answered with a certainty that sent a wave of warmth through Kellen. "As he knows mine." Kellen realized with sudden clarity that the silver eyes of the Netherians, the feature that had once seemed most alien to him, allowed them to perceive emotional truths beyond physical appearances. Vera had always seen him more clearly than he had ever been seen before. The ceremony began as Azalon's twin moons aligned above the crystal-domed ceiling. Kellen and Vera moved toward each other step by synchronized step, as the elders chanted in harmonics that made the very air vibrate. When they met at the center, Vera extended her hands, palms up. Kellen placed his hands in hers, and the contact created an immediate surge of energy that spiraled upward around them, connecting to the crystalline dome above. "Two worlds," Elder Jacine intoned. "Separate but connected. Two hearts, distinct but harmonized. Two paths, now joined as one." The energy field intensified, becoming almost opaque around them. Within this cocoon of light, Vera leaned forward until her forehead touched his. "I offer you my world," she whispered. "And I offer you mine," Kellen responded. Their consciousness expanded outward simultaneously, Kellen experiencing the collective memory of 20,000 years of Netherian history, while Vera absorbed his understanding of the wider galaxy and the confluence. Knowledge flowed between them like water finding its level, filling gaps neither had known existed. The ceremonial chamber shuddered as distant explosions penetrated the atmosphere. The binding energy flickered, threatened to collapse, but instead strengthened, drawing power from the very disruption intended to destroy it. When the energy field finally dissipated, Kellen and Vera stood transformed. The constellation patterns of her skin were now faintly visible on his, while her silver eyes now held hints of his human irises, physical manifestations of their neural and spiritual connection. "The Syndicate has engaged the confluence forces in orbit," Tavanis reported, rushing back into the chamber. "They fight each other rather than focusing on us." "Not for long," Vera said, her voice overlapping with Kellen's as they spoke the same thought simultaneously. "We must show them something unexpected." As they moved in perfect synchrony toward the planetary defense controls, the gathered Netherians witnessed something their legends had only hinted at: the power of two worlds truly united, neither conquering nor submitting, but creating something entirely new. The convergence had begun, and with it, a transformation that would extend far beyond Azalon to reshape the very stars themselves. Beyond the cosmic veil 3 months after the binding ceremony, the newly constructed Harmony Spire rose from Mount Celavis, its crystalline structure pulsing with the combined energy signatures of Netherian wisdom and confluence technology. From its apex, Kellen and Vera watched as delegations from 12 worlds gathered in the valley below. "The Syndicate representatives have arrived," Tavanis reported, now serving as chief diplomat of the newly formed Azalon Alliance. The once shy warrior had found her true calling in the diplomatic corps Kellen had helped establish. "Show them to the Eastern Pavilion," Vera instructed, her silver-flecked eyes meeting Kellen's. Through their bond he felt her mixture of caution and determination. "Having them here is a risk," he acknowledged, the faint constellation patterns on his skin glowing in response to her emotions. "Peace always is," Vera replied, resting her azure hand over his. "But isolation is no longer an option for any world that wishes to survive." The Battle of Azalon's Rings, when the combined Netherian confluence forces had demonstrated their unified power, had reverberated across the sector. The Syndicate, faced with an alliance they couldn't easily defeat, had grudgingly accepted the invitation to negotiate terms for shared access to diluted azulonite crystals for medical applications only. Kellen's former superior, Ambassador Trelorian, approached with Elder Gysene. The unlikely friendship between the ancient Netherian and the veteran Confluence diplomat had become a symbol of the new era. "The treaty framework is prepared," Trelorian announced. "All 12 worlds have signaled preliminary acceptance, including the provision protecting Azalon's sovereign status," Vera asked, her tone making clear this was non-negotiable. Prominently featured in the opening article, Elder Gysene confirmed with a rare smile. "Your binding has proved more powerful than any of us anticipated." Indeed, the neural and spiritual connection between Kellen and Vera had expanded beyond them to create pathways of understanding between their peoples. Where fear and suspicion had once ruled, curiosity and cautious respect now flourished. Twilight descended. The ceremonial drums began their rhythm. Kellen and Vera descended from the spire to take their positions at the center of the treaty circle. Around them stood representatives from the confluence worlds, the neutral systems, and even 3 syndicate planets whose leaders had recognized the changing galactic winds. "Today we stand at the threshold of a new understanding," Kellen began, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering. "Not as conquerors or conquered," Vera continued seamlessly, "but as equal bearers of wisdom from different stars." Together they activated the ceremonial crystal that would record the treaty in both traditional Netherian light script and standard confluence code. As it rose above the assembly, projecting the treaty terms in multiple languages simultaneously, murmurs of approval spread through the gathered delegates. Later, as Azulon's moons cast their silvery light across the celebration, Kellen and Vera slipped away to their private sanctuary high in the crystal forests. Here, away from diplomatic protocols and political considerations, they could simply be themselves, neither fully of one world nor the other, but something wonderfully in between. "Do you ever regret it?" Vera asked as they sat beneath the bioluminescent canopy. "Giving up your life among the stars to be bound to one world?" Kellen smiled, tracing one of the constellation patterns on her arm with gentle fingers. "I haven't given up the stars," he said softly. "I carry them with me now. In you." The neural link between them pulsed with shared emotion, deeper than words could express. What had begun as a diplomatic mission had transformed into something ancient texts had only hinted at. A connection that transcended physical boundaries and cultural differences. "The binding was only the beginning," Vera said, her silver-flecked eyes reflecting the dancing lights above. "What we build together will outlast us both." As the night deepened around them, their joined hands created a soft glow that illuminated the path forward, not just for them, but for 2 civilizations that had found in each other not an enemy to fear, but a partner to cherish. Beyond the cosmic veil that had once separated their worlds, a new constellation was forming. One star at a time, one connection at a time, one shared dream of a future where difference was strength and unity didn't require uniformity. And at its heart, a human and an Netherian who had dared to see beyond the shadows of isolation to the infinite possibilities that awaited when fear gave way to understanding, and understanding blossomed into love.